Hi everybody, welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. It's been a while since we've done one of these video tours. These are videos that I put on my other channel, Explore Church Sites, but I occasionally like to show them on this channel. And we're going to start out at the Kansas City, Missouri Temple. And then after this, we're going to head over to Independence and go to the Temple Lot and Community of Christ Temple and the Independence Visitor Center. I felt like these videos would be good for the subject of this video. We're going to be talking about winter, and specifically winter as it may relate to the timing of the second coming, and why this year from December 21st until January 18th of next year might be a time to pay attention to. This is an idea. What I'm about to share with you is an idea that I've entertained. I'm not sure for how long, but probably at least like 3 years. It has to do with the Hebrew calendar and the timing of certain events in church history as it relates to the Hebrew calendar, things that have actually happened and may point us toward the future, specifically in regards to the second coming. And when I say second coming, as always, I'm not referring necessarily to the final appearance, the special thing that could happen, this speculation that I'm having. The special thing that could happen could be Adam on Yamin. It could be the appearance to the New Jerusalem. It could be Christ coming to the Jews. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that I fully expect for the final appearance to happen and for us to look back and say, oh, that's how Adam on Yamin happened, or that's how the appearance of the New Jerusalem happened, or whatever. I'm very flexible. So I just need to make sure that that's clear. Okay, so this idea of the second coming taking place in winter, it basically goes to the whole idea of the harvest. When you look at the Hebrew calendar and you look at the major feast days or holy days, they basically come in two groups. You have the spring feasts and the fall feasts. And these are usually associated with certain types of harvest, like barley, grapes, and so on. So the spring feast, you have Passover, like the Passover meal. You have Passover week, Pesach, which is sometimes referred to as the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The whole, week, you're not supposed to have anything that has leaven. During that time, you also have Bikurim, which is first fruits. It's the first barley sheaf that's brought to the temple that begins the harvest of that year. And then 50 days later, you arrive at Pentecost. That's why it's called Pentecost. It's also known as the Feast of Weeks or Shavuot in Hebrew. And that's around the time of the wheat harvest. And there's a lot of wheat imagery around that time. But you have this idea of harvesting and how it starts in the spring. And then later on in the fall, you have 3 fall feast days or holy days. You have Rosh Hashanah, also known as the Feast of Trumpets. 10 days later, you have Yom Kippur, or the Day of Atonement. And these two actually kind of go together. These 10 days all together are known as the 10 days of awe, with Yom Kippur being the holiest day on the Hebrew calendar. Rosh Hashanah is the Jewish New Year. There's actually 4 New Years, but what we think of as a new year, where you change the date from one year to the next, that's Rosh Hashanah, the Feast of Trumpets. And then after those two, after Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you have Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles, or sometimes called the Feast of Booths. And there's a lot of harvest imagery with these as well. But then after that comes winter, where there is no more harvest. Okay, so it's interesting because if you look at the Hebrew calendar, and I'll put it up on the screen right now. I got this graphic from Rabbi Gerfine. I was set up with him by Israel 365, and we spoke for like 2, maybe 2.5 years. He gave this to me where you have the different tribes of Israel, And in Judaism, they associate each tribe with a month of the year. So you have Judah that corresponds with the month of Nisan. And this is the month where you have Passover and first fruits and the Feast of Unleavened Bread and so forth. So, and that's also the month in which Christ performed the atonement. When you think about Holy Week and the crucifixion and all that. So Nisan, Judah, and Christ was from the tribe of Judah. Okay. So Nisan is the first of the spring months, followed by Iyar and Sivan, which correspond to Zebulun and Issachar. After that, you have the summer months, starting with Reuben's month of Tammuz, and then Av for Simeon, and then Elul for Gad. And then the first of the fall months is Tishri for Ephraim. So Tishri is when you have these other feast days. So virtually all the feast days take place, like these major ones take place in either Nisan with Judah or Tishri with Ephraim, with the exception of Pentecost. That falls in the month of Sivan with Issachar. But anyway, we're talking about fall. So Ephraim starts the fall, and then after that, Manasseh with Chisvan, and then Benjamin with Kislev. And then you have Dan that brings in the first winter month of Tevet, or sometimes it's called Teves. After that, Shavat and Adar with Asher and Naphtali. So what I've noticed is that Christ literally fulfilled those feast days, the spring feast days, during his mortal ministry at the end, during that last Passover week. Those feast days were meant to remind Israel of the past and God delivering them, but really they were more meant to point forward to the future, to Christ, when Messiah would come and perform his mission. You know, he is the Paschal Lamb. So he fulfilled that part of those feasts by performing the atonement, being the first fruits. And then after he was resurrected and he left, that's when the Holy Ghost came, and the Holy Ghost was given as so you have Christ as the comforter, but then you have the Holy Ghost, which is the comforter that was left for us in the absence of Christ. That came on Pentecost, Shavuot. And so Shavuot was fulfilled back in that dispensation, in the dispensation of the meridian of time. Well, after that, you had the great apostasy. The priesthood keys were taken off the earth, and you had the great apostasy. Okay. And then you have this last dispensation, which seems to correspond with these fall feast days, because Joseph Smith, he received the gold plates on Rosh Hashanah. We've talked about this a million times, but it would kind of make sense, right? If you're thinking about the meridian of time, Christ's dispensation being associated with the spring, and then you have this last dispensation being associated with the fall, it kind of makes sense. And I don't think it's coincidence that Joseph Smith received the gold plates on Rosh Hashanah. It is the primary harvest tool in this dispensation. It's also the first of those fall feast days. Again, you have Rosh Hashanah and then Yom Kippur, and then after that you have the Feast of Tabernacles or Sukkot. And so it seems to me, and I can't say this for sure, but it seems to me like Rosh Hashanah, if it was pointing forward to something, it may have been pointing forward to the Book of Mormon. You know, one of the primary features of Rosh Hashanah is the blowing of the ram's horn, the shofar, or, it's called the Feast of Trumpets because of that you blow the shofar. It's a warning call. It's a reminder that Yom Kippur is just around the corner and get ready for that. Which, by the way, just for that reason, Yom Kippur could be a prime candidate for one of the appearances of Christ, but that's yet to be seen. But anyway, you have the fall, you have this last harvest before winter comes. And of course, and we know that there's still going to be missionary work in the millennium. The work of salvation goes on. We haven't reached heaven or the celestial kingdom at that point. The millennium is still mortality. It's still probation. It's just that those that have lived a celestial life will not be here to enjoy that time. It's only going to be terrestrials and celestials, but it's still mortality, and people still have agency all the way till the very end, after the millennium, up until this earth is finished and it becomes a celestial world. But that's not till after the millennium. So, but anyway, a lot of times when we're talking about this last dispensation and getting ready for the second coming, you have this harvest imagery. And it would seem to me that this is the last harvest before winter comes. Okay. So again, in the spring, the first spring month is Nisan, and that's the month of Judah. So it's fitting that Christ came at that time. That's the big mission of Judah. We've read quotes that said that Judah's job was to prepare the world for Christ's first coming. And then Ephraim's job is to prepare the world for the second coming. And so it would make sense that, these are the two tribes, that's their jobs. And you have these special times of the year. So what about summer? Now, I don't know if my theory is right. Summer, it seems like that would correspond with the great apostasy. The first summer month, Tammuz, is the month of Reuben. And one of the things about Reuben is he lost the birthright. It should have been his. He was the eldest, but he transgressed, and so he lost the birthright. So it kind of makes sense with this idea that summer would be associated with the great apostasy. If we're looking at like this big calendar from Christ's dispensation until the millennium, then I think that would make sense. But then what about Dan and winter? Dan is the first winter month. Well, I think if this is right, I think winter would correspond with the millennium. Because in a sense, at least for those that are living a telestial life, it is the end of the harvest. Like if you're telestial, you only have until Christ comes and the wicked are burned, because telestial is the definition of the wicked. So you have that portion of the harvest that's going to end. We have all this, like all these times that it's been said that we're in the 11th hour. That's in reference to, the ending of the harvest for that day, the last time before night comes. And so that's why I'm really interested in the month of Tevet. And this year, like I said earlier, that is going to start on the 21st of December. Now, what's interesting is that that's a Sunday, so that's kind of interesting by itself. I'm not saying that anything would necessarily happen on the 1st of Tevet, but that's the first day of the month of Dan. If maybe something would happen on that day, I don't know. The 21st of December is winter solstice, and we've talked about that before. This isn't the first time that I've talked about this. I do a video like this maybe once a year, but winter solstice is probably one of the best symbols of the harvest really coming to a close. Like that's the end of the year, like as far as the length of days go, and the tilt of the earth and the seasons. That's the end of the year, essentially. And it's the beginning of the new year. It's the beginning of the days starting to get longer. And when I say longer and shorter, I'm talking about the northern hemisphere, of course. And so you have this imagery of the harvest like really coming to a close, like this is it. And then the beginning of the new cycle. And so you can see how that might apply to the second coming and transitioning from this period to the next period. I also want to point out really quick before I continue with that thought. When you look at the camp of Israel in the Bible, when Israel was wandering in the wilderness, whenever they camped around the tabernacle in a certain order, and it was by tribe. So on the east side of the tabernacle, you had Judah, like directly in front of the tabernacle, and then Zebulun and Issachar on either side. And the way that it worked was that you have the 12 tribes, and they're broken up into groups of 3. And within each group of 3, one of those tribes is like the leader tribe. So in the case of the east, Judah is the leader tribe of Zebulun and Issachar. In the south, it's Reuben, like in the middle, and then Simeon and Gad on either side, Reuben being the leader tribe. In the west, it's Ephraim. Ephraim is the leader tribe of Manasseh and Benjamin. Those 3 are in the west. And then Dan is in the north. And Dan is the leader tribe of Naphtali and Asher. And then you also have the tribe of Levi, but you'll remember there's a difference between land inheritance as well as tribes. I mean, really, if you had people stand according to tribe, there would be 13 tribes. Joseph was broken up into 2, Ephraim and Manasseh. And then you still have the tribe of Levi. There's like 13, but when we're talking about land, or when we're talking about, the camp of Israel here, you have the 12 tribes that go around, and then the Levites are kind of like surrounding the tabernacle. But anyway, so that's why it's interesting in Judaism. And I don't know if this is necessarily doctrinal, but it makes sense. It makes sense that you'd have these months, like the month of Judah, Nisan, that would be the first spring month. It's like they also march this way. So when they packed up and marched to a different location, they would march in this order. And so it makes sense. Nisan, that's the first month it's the first spring month. It's the month of Judah. And then the same thing with Reuben for summer, Ephraim, fall, Dan, winter. And again, I want to point out, it seems like these key events, the atonement, the resurrection, that actually happened in the month of Judah, Nisan. And then in the case of Ephraim, Tishri, that's Ephraim's month. That's the month that the Book of Mormon, the gold plates were delivered to Joseph Smith. So it's like these things actually happen in these months associated with these leader tribes. So that's why I have my eye on Dan's month, the month of Tevet. So let's get back to that. So this year, the first day of Tevet is on winter solstice, and that's not always the case. It just happens to be the case this year. Remember, 21 is 3 sevens. So it's on winter solstice. It's also on the 8th day of candles, or the 8 candles of Hanukkah. But that's not unusual. And then there's also this thing with the proximity to Christmas. I don't know how things are going to go in the millennium, but if I were to bet, I'm willing to bet that whatever day the final appearance takes place, that's probably going to become a holiday, just like Christmas and Easter. I could be wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. And so it'd be interesting if maybe Christmas and the second coming become one holiday, or maybe not. I don't know. Or you'd have like second coming day and then Christmas, or Christmas and then second coming day. I don't know. But in the case that it has anything to do with Christmas, it all kind of lines up with Tevet and Dan. And it's just an interesting time of the year, the winter solstice. That's why just symbolically, it feels like all those things work together. Um, if it happens on Christmas, then that would obviously be intentional, and maybe the intention would be, okay, look, I've already come the first time, and we've gone through that phase. I am now here the second time. This is now a whole new ball game. And I say whole new ball game because the millennium is going to be different than now. We've read in Millennial Messiah by Bruce R. McConkie, he's talked about the fact that we're going to have more scripture that comes during that time. All these like references to scriptures that we don't have, whether it's the sealed portion of the gold plates, whether it's things that were written by Adam or any of the patriarchs, the writings of John that's talked about in the Doctrine and Covenants, like other writings that we don't have. Like all these things are going to be restored. They're going to be published. We're going to have access to them. He talks about the fact that there's going to be doctrines in endless array that we don't even know of right now. So Christmas being replaced by Second Coming Day, I feel like that could be the case. Like it's a shift in focus. Now Christ has come the second time. Maybe we still would celebrate Christmas in a certain way, but there'd be more emphasis that he has come again. And this time he is the king of earth. He's the actual political king of earth. So yeah. Also, just while I'm thinking about it, I wanted to point out this year, this is the year that President Oaks became president of the church, and he became president of the church in October. And on the Hebrew calendar, it was the 22nd day of Tishri. Remember, Tishri is the month of Ephraim. So I find that kind of interesting. We have a president of the church, one that we really have our eyes on because of his connection with President Nelson. The two of them became apostles together. You have the symbolism of the heart surgeon, and then you have the symbolism of the judge. President Nelson was very focused on the second coming. It's yet to be seen what President Oaks is going to do, but I feel like there's still going to be a heavy emphasis on the second coming because ultimately it's the Lord that's speaking through his prophets. But anyway, you have this prophet who became president of the church in Tishri, the month of Ephraim. In the case of President Nelson, if we go back to 2018, he became president of the church in January, also on the 14th, which I think that's interesting. They both became presidents of the church on the 14th of the month. In the case of President Nelson, January. In the case of President Oaks, October. But both of them on the 14th. And President Nelson, on the Hebrew calendar, it was the 27th of Tevet. So the month of Dan. Dan is one of the four leader tribes. Again, those are Judah, Reuben, Ephraim, and Dan. So, and with with President Nelson being so focused on the second coming, and if this idea is right that the second coming, one or all of the appearances take place during Dan's month, then that makes that even more interesting that he became president of the church during Tevet. Well, now that I'm thinking about it, it's also interesting that he became president of the church on the 27th of Tevet because he passed away on the 27th of September. And if you think of the Roman calendar, September was the 7th month. That's why it's called September. October was the 8th. That's on the Roman calendar. So that's kind of interesting. I'm also just noticing, sorry, I don't have it up on the screen, but I'm looking at hebcal.com. It shows our calendar and their calendar. And I don't think I've made note of this before. I'm kind of surprised. But President Nelson became president of the church Um, let's see. No, oh, sorry. I I got a little bit confused there. He became president of the church 5778. The year 5778 on the Hebrew calendar. The year before that was 5777. So sorry, I got confused. Um, right now, in case you're curious, the year on the Hebrew calendar is 5786. 5786. So, okay, let me just double check, make sure I'm not missing anything. I could be completely wrong about all this, and that's fine. Maybe, you have other second coming events that'll take place. Like if Rosh Hashanah was fulfilled by the coming forth of the gold plates, maybe we're still waiting for a fulfillment of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Maybe we're still waiting on a fulfillment of Sukkot, which is the Feast of Tabernacles. So again, that would take place. These days usually fall either in September or October of any given year. They're fall feasts. So those are days to watch out for. When I first started this channel, I was much more interested in the Hebrew calendar, and I still think that it's significant, but for all the reasons that I said. On top of the fact that in this dispensation, Elijah appeared in the Kirtland Temple on Bikurim, or first fruits. And in that year, it was also Easter. Easter is basically the Christian observance of first fruits. But there's some years where they fall on the same day, and that was one of those years. So, okay, but anyway, so there could be special things that happen Yom Kippur or Sukkot, but then we also, I think, we need to think about Dan. Maybe on Hanukkah, because you have that overlap where Hanukkah bleeds in to the month of Dan, Tevet. Hanukkah is not one of these like biblical feast days. So it's not like these other ones that were mandated in the Old Testament. It's something that came along later, but even that may have significance. There was an interesting thing that happened. Let me pull up this spreadsheet. Let's see. You're not gonna be able to see it, but I'll just tell you. There was this interesting thing that happened. Yeah, here we go. On Christmas Day 2022. On Christmas Day 2022, that happened to be the 8th day of candles for Hanukkah. So that's when the entire, like all the candles are lit. That's like the full thing. They're all lit. And on that day, there was a rare planetary octet. So like a planetary alignment from like our point of view, like as we view the planets from Earth, there was a planetary alignment of 8 planets. Now, it's called an octet because it includes either the Earth or the Moon, and this is according to the various articles that I pulled up. The reference that I have here is from skyandtelescope.org, but they say the same thing on like space.com and other places. So the planets were Mercury. So just imagine like seeing this in the sky. And most of these are visible to the naked eye, but but in the sky, you had Mercury, Venus, the Moon, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus. So it's like you had a celestial menorah on the 8th day of candles of Hanukkah and Christmas Day. Those 3 things, the planetary alignment, 8th day of candles, and Christmas. In 2022, those 3 things came together. And I still feel like that's a sign of some sort. That's the same day, actually. if I'm remembering this right. If I go to my spreadsheet called signs, comets, meteors, asteroids, go back to 2022. Yes. Not only that, but there were articles about these 3 giant asteroids that pass by Earth. And what's interesting is that just a couple months before, there were 3 asteroids that passed by Earth. And then a few weeks later, February of 2023. Oh, no, sorry. There was another set of 3 asteroids. No, sorry. September of 2023, there were 3 asteroids that passed by Earth. And those 3 asteroids passed by Earth on Yom Kippur. So you had a set of 3. Then a couple months later, a giant set of 3 on Christmas and Hanukkah and the planetary alignment day. And then the next year, there was another set of 3 that were smaller than the previous set. So it's like small asteroids, giant asteroids, and then back to small, but they're all sets of 3. And the third set passed by Earth on Yom Kippur. Is this pointing forward to something? I don't know. Does it have to do with the month of Dan, Tevet, and Christmas and Hanukkah? I don't know. That's just what happened. So we're just taking note. All I'm saying is, from the 21st of this month until the 18th of January, maybe just pay attention. Let's see if anything special happens. Let's take note of it. I'll put it on my spreadsheets. Maybe Adam Yamin, maybe Christ coming to the New Jerusalem, whatever that means, however that looks. Maybe Christ coming to the Jews. What if between now and then there's like another flare up, a war between Israel and whoever? Things can happen very quickly. So we'll just have to wait and see. But I look at this, I look at the camp of Israel, camped around the tabernacle. I look at the Jewish year, the Hebrew year, and these key tribes, like the leader tribes. And it just feels like something should happen during the winter. And if anything, during the month of Dan, Tevet. You can excuse Reuben again, because if this calendar here, if it kind of started, if it started with Judah and it started with Christ's dispensation, and then summer, was the great apostasy with Reuben, then that makes sense. And then the last dispensation, the fall harvest with Ephraim, that makes sense. And so it just makes sense that winter may correspond with Dan and the millennium, and just like the end, So anyway, that's all that I have for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.